Here, I want to just flip through this presentation really quick because this is fucking good, Abby. I don't know if you've looked through this one. How to sell heat pumps to contractors and homeowners. It's the whole damned argument. Showing different things working. That's where I first came up with this picture.
Yeah.
And I bought the image because I wanted a high res one.
Are you going to present this, or are you going to just flip through like you're doing now?
It's probably best not to share the screen in my mind because it's kind of messy for a thing. I'm basically just flipping through to see what stuff is in here. Excellent experiences. Yeah, so I started with kitchen table. I haven't looked through all these slides in a little while.
Mm-hmm.
Can I? No, it doesn't let me slide that over. Let's see if I can make that bigger. Consumer education. I mean, like everything we need is in here. Asking versus telling is key.
Got it. So you're just going to flip that through in the background and
Yeah, exactly. So I can have this probably running while we're talking and just remind me. But I just wanted to pull through and see if there's anything that I'm missing in here.
Yeah.
Yeah, here we are. Screw you. I won't do what you tell me. Have you seen this GIF? This is one of my favorite GIFs.
Yeah. I love it.
That is so human nature right there. You can't do this. Oh yeah? Fuck you. Watch me. That's what all of this is.
It's that Rage Against the Machine song, right? Fuck you.
Yes.
I won't do what you tell me.
Oh yeah, they did a song. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So okay, let me just a quick run through here. Make sure there's not some other. I'm just making notes of a couple of talking points so I can look down at them and double check. I think it might be good to introduce the idea of the two clocks. Have you seen this concept?
Mm-hmm.
Because the key that we really need to do is to make it so that any piece of equipment with a compressor is a heat pump.
Right.
Like there's furnaces. We aren't going to get rid of furnaces anytime soon. You can try and ban furnaces, but when you start getting stories of little old ladies getting $1,500 electric bills in the middle of the winter, I'm going to say I told you so. You can't just do that. You have to test.
Right.
But still, we can at least get there. Okay. How are you feeling?
Pretty good. Ready to go. So One question about this 30,000 feet is that you're not sharing your screen.
Yeah, I'm going to shut it off. Yeah.
What's our ability to, I'm confident about ability to translate this to audio only podcast, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty confident. Yeah.
You got it. Okay.
Okay, I'll stop share. There we go. Your Audacity's going. Mine is going. Okay.
Well, hi, this is Abhi.
And I'm Nate.
Welcome to another episode of Boundary Spanners, where Nate and I will, paddle through our combined 2, maybe 3, maybe more decades of experience in decarbonizing homes, from policy to programs to implementation, technology, building businesses, and so on. And we are trying to explore solutions to decarbonizing homes that lies at the boundary of all these different knowledge domains. This episode is called The Church of the Kitchen Table. What does that mean, Nate?
So when it comes to decarbonization, what are the two parties that actually matter?
The Democrats and the Republicans. No.
Exactly. That's close enough.
The homeowner and the contractor, right?
Exactly. I mean, it's who is selling and doing the work on one hand, that's the contractors, and it is who is buying and paying for the work, which is the homeowners. Nothing else matters.
Hmm.
I feel like we should like hit that little riff of and nothing else matters right
Oh
now.
yeah, we don't have the budget for
so next time maybe. All right, so somebody
play
sponsor this
Metallica.
show, okay? um but yeah, the those are the only two that matter. So like when a utility program is like, I have my goals, screw you, I don't care about your goals. And the curse is the incentives of contractors and homeowners, well, those are different to begin with. But when you throw in the incentives of utilities, utility programs, governments, decarbonization goals, all those things end up muddying the waters and creating friction in that really, really fragile transaction. Selling a heat pump, getting contractors comfortable, particularly in cold climates, with selling heat pumps is extremely difficult. How do we know this? Because we've gotten them there in the HVAC 2.0 program. So they get there. But it's the same thing as me. The first heat pump I put in, do you think I was confident that was going to work? Hell no, I was terrified. Like, geez, I hope this thing works. Because I mean, I nearly got into a fist fight over that contractor showing up with the wrong unit at the house. And I mean, so to be clear, this is the Energy Smart home performance practice, our Cleveland practice, which is now it's pretty much wound down at this point. But we learned how to do these electrifications that way, and so it was hard to find a contractor that was willing to do it. And then when I did, I specified a 3-ton. And they quoted a 3-ton, and I go the day of install, look on the back of the thing, and it's a 4-ton. And I'm like, oh, so we'll get into this. This is a whole nother thing, but static pressure, the pressure inside the ducts, the duct pressure is super duper important. If it's too high, you will kill the equipment really early. So I'm like, no, you can't do a 4. And it was a 3-hour fight that ended with my partner, Ted, calling the contractor's mother some rather rude things before he finally moved. Because like we tried all the nice stuff and kept turning up the volume, but they were terrified. And so was I. And so the first time out when we're doing this, like getting cold climate HVAC contractors comfortable with the idea of full decarbonization is really hard. And then you have to get the homeowners there, which is a lot of education and backup, and you're quelling fears left and right. So as soon as you try to mess with that already extremely fragile transaction, which by the way costs a lot more than doing it the other way, a crappy furnace and a crappy air conditioner are a lot cheaper than a good heat pump or a good furnace and heat pump. So it's thousands of dollars difference between the two. And so as soon as you're like, well, it needs to be this SEER, or you have to use this method, or it needs to be on this list, and then you change the rules and change the list. If you think of the transaction being like an engine, or a motor, we'll call it an electric motor. But imagine pouring a bucket of sand into a running electric motor. Mm-hmm. It gets in the bearings, it tears it up. It stops everything from contacting the way it should. It's really, really bad. And the curse is anyone who is involved at the kitchen table that is other than the homeowner and the contractor is getting in the way and adding sand, adding friction to that transaction. So stay the hell away with whatever program design you're doing, because you're going to end up screwing stuff up and not realizing why. It can be really light pressures that end up, it messes with things. So another way to look at it, the program that I used to work with, so when I won the Century Club Award with the Department of Energy's Home Performance and Energy Star program, so I won that in 2012 with my insulation company, and they would pay, I forget what it was, 10 cents a square, let's call it 10 cents a square foot. I think it was more than that. I think it was 40 cents or 50 cents per square foot for insulation. And then they would pay $40 per hour for air sealing work. So what that ended up doing was shaping what the project looked like. So you wanted to purposely use labor heavy methods and maximize the number of hours. So, I mean, what I wanted to do was, it was up to a $1,200 cap. So if I could show enough hours of work to burn the whole 1,200, I was happy. And so was the client. So you would end up using methods that were more labor heavy. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the best way to do it. So now that I am freed from those constraints, now on our projects, we use closed cell spray foam almost exclusively. And that bothers some people a lot. If you don't watch what kind you get, the global warming potential of it's pretty serious. But the new blowing agents are quite good. And that gives you insulation, air sealing, and moisture control all in one product. But with that program, you would get either or, and it's much more expensive to do. So it would be 2, 3, 4 times the cost to spray foam something versus doing basic air sealing and then blowing in the attic. So by having it structured that way, and I mean, it was well-meaning. It's not like there's any evil intentions here. It's like, well, we had to make a rule, so that's the rule. And so, but it ended up changing how the project happened and what the results were. And fairly often it wasn't fixing things, and we weren't moving blower doors as much as I would like, the air leakage on the house. So that was shifting, how the project worked just by how the program was designed. And there's lots and lots of examples of that.
So let me pause you there. So let me see if I'm understanding this right. So you had an insulation business,
mm-hmm.
and you won an award from the DOE,
mm-hmm.
and so you as a contractor, you have certain goals from your business, right? So the goals involve having a sustainable long-term business, doing good projects and doing them profitably.
Yep.
That's presumably your goal. Now the homeowner, what are their goals when it comes to doing insulation?
I often didn't know.
Fascinating. Can you expand on that?
So I mean, sometimes you'd know that they'd want to deal with icicles or something like that, but I would be usually full of hubris and say, oh, well, we can do this. But thankfully, I wasn't usually full of too much hubris, but there were a couple times I was like, yep, this will solve the problem. And I learned quickly, you can't do that, because in the case of icicles, you can't stop the sun. And so the peak of the roof, the heat from that's in the attic will get there, melt the peak of the roof, the black roof shows, and then the ice melts down. So I can't control that.
Right.
Nearly so, because I live in Cleveland, but yeah, there's a limit.
So you had a program which would pay you $40 an hour, but 10 cents a square foot. And as a consequence of which, your business relied significantly on the program, enough to a point where at that time, we were talking like a decade ago,
mm-hmm.
It wasn't even important for you to know what the goals of the homeowner was.
Yep,
you just
correct.
showed up, you oriented your business practices in a way that maximized the incentive that you would get. And that's natural, right? The incentives matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a contractor. So I'm interested to know, when you talked about the fragile relationship between the homeowner and the contractor, what are ways in which this program contributed to, interacted with that fragile relationship between the homeowner and contractor? Like, did you, for example, have to go back and fix some of the stuff? How was it fragile, and how did it add friction?
Well, in the case of those smaller projects, it probably wasn't adding a great deal of friction, but what it was doing on the business side was it was holding job size down. And that could be really problematic. And that was ultimately what killed me. I had to work so hard to get jobs that averaged about $2,500 a piece. I was working 80 to 100 hours a week to keep my crew working 30 or 35. And that's super common in contracting. So you have all these balls in the air that you're trying to do. So ideally what you want to do is bump your job size and bump your closing ratio. So you're doing less bids and you don't have to work as hard to keep your crew busy. And so part of this was in my own head, because I was like, ooh, be happy. But most consumers, so this is just insulation, so we're not talking HVAC here. Most consumers for insulation are expecting to spend somewhere between $1,000 and $3,000. So if I could show them a $1,250 rebate on a $3,000 job, now it costs them $1,750. They're happy. I thought I was happy, but I wasn't realizing that I was actually killing myself to where my margins weren't high enough for me to not work so darn hard. And the day that I decided to kill the business, it was probably the day after, my wife looked at me and said, Nate, can I spend one evening a week alone with you, have your full attention? And I told her no. I was that stressed out, that busy. Is that a healthy way to live? And at that point, she was pregnant. And I'm like, my dad worked so much when I was a kid that I didn't see him. Now, thankfully, he worked right behind our house, so I got to see him some, but I didn't interact with him much until my teen years. And I didn't want to do that. So that was a bad setup. So that is an unsustainable model to do. So, I mean, ideally, what we want to do is increase job sizes, increase closing ratios, so that the owners have to work less hard to sell, and hopefully they have the margin to hire a salesperson to help, because I didn't have the margin. I tried to squeeze that in, and I'm like, so well, the ironic thing is I made almost $100,000 with that company the first 2 years. So I was doing quite well. But then I learned how to do building science and do my job well. And the last year I made 25 grand. 10 of it was on one job early in the year. And I got to work upwards of 80 hours a week for my trouble. That's stupid. And a lot of that was, it's a free money versus a goals thing. So if you're like, oh, over here on the right, this is what we want to fix. Over here on the left is free money. The free money is, ooh, shiny. And we all head over that direction and we ignore what the original goals were. And good stuff doesn't end up happening nearly as often as it would if we just stayed focused on the goals. And so I was so focused on getting clients money and, helping make my jobs bigger, that I was often ignoring delivering good results. So it didn't happen all the time, but it definitely happened some, where people would come back and be like, it didn't fix it, or it made it worse. In the case of one, and oddly enough, he's in the commercial HVAC business. I bumped into him a little while ago. He's got a podcast. I helped him out with his house, and we insulated a crawl space underneath an addition that stuck out behind his house. We lowered the load of the house, so it didn't take as much to heat it anymore, and his furnace was already oversized. The addition got colder after insulating, so we did a good job, which actually screwed up comfort. But he got the rebate, and so there's better ways to look at it.
So the first 2 years when you were making 100 grand a year, was that still with the program?
Trying to think, was it? It was, and part of what was going on there was I was also doing some of the work myself, so I didn't yet have a full crew. But also, like when I was asking the guys to air seal, one of my guys, like, he kept burning through an entire case of foam on every job. And I'm like, Scott, you got to ease up, buddy. You're using $150 of material and I'm only charging 400, and it's taking you longer than that too. So like, I'm losing money on this. You got to be gentle. And so it was doing the better work, but not yet knowing how to charge enough for it was a lot of what it was. And you have to be able to show value to people. Now routinely a shell job for work that I do is between $10,000 and $25,000. That is very different than a $2,500 average. But realistically, if we're going to decarbonize cold climate homes, we have got to do between $10,000 and $30,000 worth of shell work to them to get them to where a 3-ton heat pump will carry them. So that's a problem, because now are we going to sell jobs that are 4 to 12 times larger than what most people want to pay?
Right.
You got to show some value.
So just trying to make sure I understand this right. So one of the consequences of having these incentive programs is you're saying that it perverts or bastardizes your conception of your business model.
Yep.
So it's like, I mean, I'm not a contractor, so I'm trying to put it in my terms. Like if I went to a grocery store with the goal of getting something healthy to eat, and I go there and they've got like a sale on Nutella, you buy one, get one free. Then I know, right? So good. And so then it's easy for me to lose sight of what my original goals were for being there, and then go down this path. And then before you realize, your whole business structure is centered around the way these incentives are structured. So you're not learning on the job, and you're not thinking too much about these margins and stuff like that. And you find yourself in a rut. Is that how you're describing your situation?
100%. Yeah. You also tend to not grow, because if you have this really wide range of possibilities, program design can very easily narrow them. And the problem is where it narrows them could be the wrong direction.
Got it.
And so therein lies the rub. So don't screw with the kitchen table. That's called downstream incentives. Avoid downstream at all costs, because you're going to have unintended consequences of your program design choices that you don't realize.
And so for policymakers who are, let's say, designing a program like this, they might end up recruiting. I mean, you were describing an insulation business, but we can imagine similarly, they are trying to recruit HVAC. And chances are that because it narrows the solution space, it constrains that solution space, they might end up recruiting contractors that are only working within the narrow bandwidth, or end up pivoting their business to work in the narrow bandwidth. So either way, you're taking a segment of the population and then you're not letting them grow, right?
Yes.
Because they're just like narrowly focused in that one range.
Yep. Yeah, and it can be tricky for programs too. So in my case, when I decided to shut down, I was by far the largest insulation contractor in the program. And my competitors were only mentioning it because I was. So they said that the number of projects that went through using insulation rebates afterwards fell off to darn near zero after I was gone. Wow. So, I mean, I thought I was promoting energy efficiency. We were saving energy. It was great. But I was killing myself, and most contractors are killing themselves. So they oftentimes have bad reps because they're like, oh, well, he started the job and then he didn't come back. It's like, yeah, because 20 different people called him and he was like, oh, okay, I'll just appease this. I'll go start this one. And now he's got 6 projects half completed all over town. And that's because there aren't enough contractors to go around, and we're going to be stuck in that for probably 20 years until we get better at sending kids to trade schools and teaching them mechanical things again. We're going to be struggling with that, but that's another story.
So let's talk about learning, because
mm-hmm.
When you talked about how programs end up constraining the solution space so that you're not learning new things, you're just learning how to deliver that one little program, and you don't get experience in doing jobs around it. It ties in with what we were talking about in an earlier episode, where we were saying how HVAC contractors are asked to do so much. So is the solution then that they need more training? How do contractors learn to expand the scope of their business to because it doesn't come, they don't teach you that at college, do they?
No. I mean, there's programs for HVAC, but there's 2 sides of this. There's the technical training, and there's the sales, or I would argue mindset training.
Okay.
So the technical training, an air conditioner is not that different from a heat pump. Yes, there's a learning curve, but once you learn and understand refrigeration, it's not that different. I mean, it's like a car that has a reverse versus a car that doesn't. It's still a car. One of them you just have to push out of the parking lot before you go again. So think of air conditioners like that. It's a car that you have to push out of the parking space. You got gypped. You want a two-way air conditioner or a heat pump, not one way. But the technical problem here is really not the main one. The main one is, well, for starters, being comfortable with the technology doing its job. So just like that first job that I was talking about, where we put the 3-ton heat pump in, and then I sweated bullets to see if it was going to work. I mean, that was really scary. All of these guys are going to need to go through that, but the more people that they know of in their field of influence that are saying, "Oh yeah, we're running heat pumps and it runs fine," you know, the more experience there is out there, the more bright spots there are out there, the less pushback we're going to get from this. But right now, when it comes to heat pumps, everyone's thinking about old school single stage heat pumps, and they sucked. It was like early 80s diesels. I mean, my dad had like in 1982 Tornado with the diesel, and he hated it so much that he traded it in to get a different engine. And then he didn't learn his lesson, and he bought a Chevy Dually that had the diesel engine, which one of my college professors worked at GM then, and GM knew that they were putting out a piece of crap engine. They took a gasoline engine, sleeved the cylinder so it was smaller, so it would handle the pressures of being a diesel engine, and just called it a diesel. It was an awful piece of machinery.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, well, no, let's see. He told me so. Yeah. But my dad hated that engine so much. He talked about pulling it out and then driving to Michigan and dropping it in the driveway of the executive who approved it. Like he was furious, and then putting a 454 in its place. So the problem is most HVAC contractors have had a bad experience with the heat pump, because single stage old school heat pumps are not that great.
Right.
And if they aren't used well, they're bad. I mean, I've heard plenty of stories of Southerners being like, "Oh yeah, I had a heat pump once. That thing, man, the house is so cold. I got a furnace. I'm never buying one of those things again." But in the last 5 or 10 years, as I've argued, you know, all over the place, all electric technologies have gotten to where they are superior than their gas counterparts. Induction's better than gas cooking. It's more controllable. It comes down to lower levels. It's easier to clean. You know, there's all these things. The fastest electric car right now is like in crazy dragster territory. Like in internal combustion engine cars will never, ever, ever, ever compete again at the drag strip with production cars. It's done. It's over. That car has almost 2,000 horsepower. You can't put that much and then put it down in a gasoline car. They're too peaky. It's just too hard to deal with. You can really finally do that. So, I mean, the car thing is basically over, and I'm a car guy. Heat pumps, now that we have the inverter and fully variable speed stuff, they act much more like a furnace, and they're variable speed, and there's all kinds of beautiful things that come out of it. The heat pump water heaters now, although the last generation, unfortunately, are kind of noisy. So Rheem, get on that, please. That's really annoying because I bought one. And the last generation was darn near silent, and this one was whining. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. But it now costs less to operate that one than it does a gas tank in almost all markets. That's remarkable. Like we're getting to this point where these things are all better than their fossil fuel counterparts. So we have that, but now people need to get comfortable with it.
So when you say people need to get comfortable with it, you mean contractors need to get comfortable with building a business around heat pumps?
Yeah, well, for starters, they need to get comfortable with the heat pumps.
Technically, technology-wise, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and put a couple in. I mean, run them as hybrids. The hybrids are a wonderful belt and suspenders thing. And from our experience, you can drop the gas usage of a house between 50 and 90% with a hybrid. So it depends on the load of the house, the size of the heat pump, the performance of the heat pump, a bunch of different things. But it's not hard to have the gas usage. And so if you can just sell a few heat pumps with a communicating, modulating heat pump on top, so top of the line, and you're paying some attention to the install quality, your clients are going to be like, holy crap, this house feels totally different. I can't believe it's the same place. You can do that with HVAC alone. Not every house, but probably a third. You can, and all of them, you can at least take some rough edges of the comfort out of houses. But yeah, the technical training, it's only a piece, because then you have to teach them how to talk to homeowners about this.
Okay, and so that's the fragile part of the church at the kitchen table.
Yes.
And the way I understand this is that oftentimes homeowners and contractors begin almost as in an adversarial relationship. Yeah. Homeowners don't often, they're like suspicious. Like, I don't want to tell this guy or girl too much, because then they'll try to, I don't know. So so can you expand? So why would you go to a doctor and not tell them your entire symptoms, right? If you're looking to get a diagnosis, why would you go to a lawyer and not tell them the entire details of your situation so that they can give you your best advice? People wouldn't think of doing that. And yet somehow when it comes to contracting in general, not just HVAC, but like plumbing and home contracting, homeowners will call a contractor and they will withhold information. So can you expand on that a little bit? That the fragility of that relationship, and like how you start off on that kind of like, on the opposite ends.
That's a tough thing. So let's look at the doctor relationship. You're probably not paying for it, or if you are, it's a set price regardless of what he tells you. So that there isn't an economic incentive here. We have an economic incentive problem that you want to hold back. I mean, so typical buyer behavior is extract as much information for free and leave the salesperson in the lurch. That is default behavior working with somebody who's selling you something.
So people will pick up the phone, they'll call a contractor, try to get free consulting out of them, free quotes out of them, give them as little information as possible, because they're worried that if you give them too much information, then you're going to get upsold. Is that right?
Exactly. Okay. I mean, you've probably felt this. You're just trying to sell me something.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we've all felt that pushback, and that's when the relationship is out of balance. It's not equal, and it's not a consultative relationship. It is a sales-oriented relationship, which is, it's just unpleasant. I mean, it's a sex worker relationship. I mean, I have felt it in contracting. I mean, there were times I'm just like,
it's very transactional, right? It's not built on trust. It's not built on any kind of, relationship like that. It's a transactional thing. So, So at the church of this kitchen table, you've got the contract and homeowner. I'm picturing this kitchen table, right? They're sitting on opposite ends, and they're almost like there's tension in the air between them. The homeowner is like, I don't want to give this person too much information because they'll try to upsell me. What's the contractor thinking?
This cheap punk isn't actually going to buy anything that's any good. What can I? What's the most I think I can sell this person? That's really what's going through their mind.
Right.
And that doesn't match what is actually best for that person, or even what that person wants. It's what they think they can do. So it's, that's mutual mystification. Neither side knows what the hell's going on.
And so the homeowner is not articulating their goals.
Yep.
And the contractor is sitting there thinking, how much time have I already spent here? What's my margin? What products do I need to sell? What incentive program can I sell to this homeowner so I can go get the next job?
Yep, exactly. And also, like, what do I have in the warehouse that I'm trying to get rid of? But what did my supplier tell me they can't get their hands on right now? So I don't even want to talk about that piece of equipment. Yeah, it's complicated. But what you want instead is to have a consultative way of looking at it. So, I mean, a doctor is a consultant. A lawyer, done right anyway, is a consultant. Um, so it's like, all right, doc, this, and this are happening. I've done this and this. I've considered trying this. My dad had this. What else do you need to know? And they're trying to pull together the information so that they can create a treatment plan for you. That's a consultative path where, like you said, it's transactional with contracting. It just is. And that's how things are set up. So what we suggest doing, and so I think I mentioned HVAC 101 the last time, comparing the HVAC in a car to the HVAC in a house. It's a commodity problem. The example I always use is I remember buying a $10 can of ceiling paint for our second house of 5 as we keep burning through houses. And I was trying to take a shiny ceiling and make it flat. 2.5 coats later, I was out of paint and there were still shiny parts coming through. I had to go buy another can of paint after putting 2 freaking coats on that ceiling. I was so annoyed. And so we learned then we always buy the expensive paint. We were so stuck on it that recently they were out of the high-end paint. And we're like, all right, how far are we going to have to drive to do this? And then we realized, oh, they have 7 gallons of the step down. So we bought 1 step down, but we always buy good paint because we understand that it's not actually commodity. There are quality differences. And so when you look at what a car can do with its HVAC, so you have variable speed fan, you have variable output heating and cooling. They do dehumidification, they do filtration. They'll put the air where you want it. There's all these things that the systems can do that most houses can't. And so once people have some education on that, instead of you're just trying to sell me something, they're like, so I really want this. I mean, what was it last night on our bi-weekly call in HVAC 2.0, what one client went to one of the guys and said, don't you dare try to sell me anything other than that 19 SEER piece of awesomeness right there. And I mean, how many clients are demanding
a high floor, right? Rather than a high, people will give you a ceiling, say, don't sell me anything more than X $1,000. But this person was like, I want the best, best quality stuff. It's just interesting. So to summarize, just to make sure I'm understanding this right, the current paradigm of a relationship between a homeowner and a contractor is adversarial and transactional. It's not built on a foundation of trust. And the sale happens as a commodity. And so the contractor is looking to make a quick sell, shortest amount of time possible. The homeowner doesn't want to articulate too many goals because they're afraid of being upsold. And this is the kitchen table. All is not well at the church of the kitchen table.
No.
Right? There's a lot of friction because they're adversarial. It's very fragile because they don't have trust. And so what you're suggesting is downstream incentives end up just adding another element of transaction to it rather than create a consultative process.
Yes.
Rather than free up the tension in the room, rather than build an element of trust. What it does, it just becomes yet another thing that the contractor has to juggle the math in their head about, should I sell the homeowner this or should I not sell the homeowner on this particular, incentive program? Just like they're thinking, what equipment do I have in the shed? What are my guys capable of installing? What are my margins on this project? So they've got to think of all these things. It becomes yet another element of the transaction, but there's nothing to smooth. It adds more friction.
But
more
not
things
grease.
to think about.
Yep.
Nice. So I'll put it to you then. What kind of policy proposals have you seen or have you been a part of that would go a long way towards adding some grease or reducing the friction or making this less fragile, this touch a kitchen table?
So this is where, so the kitchen table is downstream. That's happening at the point of transaction, at the sale, to the person who is actually going to install it. So it's the installer and the installee, or whatever you want to call it. That's downstream. Midstream is at the supply house level, or whatever the distribution, whatever you're going to call it for whatever industry it is, but it's supply houses for HVAC. Upstream is at the manufacturers. So upstream really can only happen at the federal level. That's just kind of how it is. Because a state's probably not going to go to a manufacturer and say, we're only going to do this. Or if they do, it's not going to stop all of the production. They're still going to keep making air conditioners and not heat pumps. So the proposal that we're discussing to a degree is what we propose. Was CLASP and Alexander Gard-Murray and myself put together a proposal to basically say, why don't we pay the manufacturers, the HVAC manufacturers, to stop making air conditioners and cover the cost difference between an air conditioner and a heat pump? Because every air conditioner has a heat pump version, with a few exceptions, like the 13 SEER there aren't, but 14 SEER and up, there are heat pump versions of everything. So what if we just write a check for that? And at that point, the supply house is only going to stock heat pumps. So in those 85% of emergency replacements, if they're getting an air conditioner, they're getting a heat pump. It just is. It's default. That's what's on the shelf. And that's really important to do. Now, provincially or states or cities or whatever you want to look at, you could do that supply house by supply house and say, all right, we're going to give you a flat, $500 a unit to not stock air conditioners anymore. And then at least heat pumps are going in. And a fair amount of the time, some people are going to be a pain and they're not going to run a new thermostat wire because you need 2 more wires to run a heat pump versus an air conditioner in general, not all the time, but in general. So you might not run a new thermostat wire and it may get wired up as an air conditioner only. But the capabilities there, it's a wire away. Where if you have an air conditioner, you really can't retrofit an air conditioner into a heat pump. There's enough changes there that the odds of failure in trying to do that and the cost of it, for what it's worth, you should just take that outdoor unit off, put a new one on. But that might also require changing some indoor stuff too. In any case, midstream is supply house, upstream is OEM. And the best thing when it comes to decarbonization is probably to make sure that you can't buy an air conditioner anymore. But it can't be a ban-based thing. Well, it shouldn't be, because as soon as you ban air conditioners, they're trying to take our air conditioners away. I mean, there's just an article that came out this week in ACHR News that was basically where they're trying to take our furnaces away. We need to fight to keep our furnaces. This is what ban does to people. You evoke the screw you, I won't do what you tell me, human nature feedback loop, which we want to avoid evoking that as much as humanly possible. And that means there should be a law thinking, should have a law against it itself.
So you don't want HVAC to be a new front on the culture war, right?
Yes.
Is you never know which thing is going to next show up on the front of this broader cultural war that that our society seems to be in. Yep. And you don't want to attract that attention.
Yep.
And you don't want it to be politicized any more than it perhaps already is. And
yeah, precisely. I mean, I try to avoid as much as possible saying the phrase climate change, because my conservative friends tend to get triggered by it, because it comes with a whole bunch of baggage behind it. So you can talk about pollution, you can talk about clean energy; those are safe, and they look the same. It's it's the same tools and the same goals at the end. But yeah, you have to be really careful doing that. And so I'm already seeing some of the culture war. And when it comes to the culture war, another really key thing to understand, I don't know the stats in Canada, but in the US, 80% of contractors are politically conservative. So if you give them any form of a dog whistle that sets off conservative people, You just lost the war. And they are literally 80% of the people that are going to be putting this stuff in. Can we achieve decarbonization with 20% of the workforce?
I mean,
probably not.
We were just talking in the previous episode that even with 100% of the workforce, there are significant challenges for decarbonization, right? Why would we artificially constrain our solution space to just 20%? And when you were talking about like people, so in effect, to take this back to where we started the conversation, climate change, words like climate change add more friction to that dialogue and the relationship between the homeowner and the contractor. So maybe there are some outliers out there, likely, where contractors are, care about, I mean, like you said, 20% of contractors, for them, maybe climate change is a priority, but the chances of them matching up with a homeowner for whom climate change is a priority. And then, and this is significant, and the homeowner actually puts money where their mouth is, because I am willing to bet, my experience has been that every contractor in America and Canada has a story to tell about the kitchen table, where they've sat down with someone who has talked the big talk about being climate aware and climate sensitive. You run the numbers and they're not willing to.
I'm sorry, we just can't afford that right now.
It's not our
Congratulations,
right.
You just locked in your personal carbon emissions for as long as you own this house and for the next 15 or 20 years for this house in general. Good job.
And that's, I mean, that's end of the day, right? It's the iron law of climate science. There's researchers that talk about this. Anytime, environmental concerns intersect or come in dialogue with economic concerns, often chances are economic concerns win out of environmental concerns. Of course, that's not to say that both are orthogonal, right? So you can have both, and there's decoupling between environmental progress and economic progress and environmental effects, blah, 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 and all of that. But at the end of the day, at the kitchen table, even people who talk the big talk don't end up walking the walk. So the words like climate change, reducing emissions, reducing impacts on the environment, do not actually further. Am I right?
This is actually a subject that just pisses me the hell off, because I've had it happen to me enough where like, oh, we're going to do this. We want to do this. It's how much? It doesn't matter how much it is.
And these are high profile people who are, who have street cred in the environmental community. That I know personally, that my contractor buddies know personally, who end of the day, when it comes to putting their own money on the line, environmental concerns don't seem to motivate them. And that's it. I mean, it is what it is. We just have to acknowledge that as a problem and not pretend that it's not.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, at the end of the day, all the problems that we are trying to solve in residential decarbonization go back to value. And for a long time, I've always hated that, like, oh, there's that damn marketing word again. But it's a real thing. I mean, transactions happen when the price is less than the value perceived, period. That's how it works. If I'm selling my car to you, the transaction only happens when you give me enough money that I'm willing to let the car go, and that you feel like it's a fair price for the car. So the value you're receiving is more than what you're paying. That's how capitalism works. And it is funny. I triggered somebody last week on Twitter using the word capitalism. I don't view it as a negative. I view it as a tool. Capitalism to me is the same as a hammer. I can kill you with a hammer, or I can build you a house. Mm-hmm. Same tool. The tool's not good or evil. It's just a tool. So we have to wield it well. But value is critical. And there's multiple points of value that we need to do here. So for contractors to actually want to decarbonize, they need to make more money. It needs to be better than current business as usual. It just has to be. Because if you have to make a change that is relatively difficult to make the same amount of money, and you don't really value what the change gives you, you're not going to do it. I mean, it's struggle. I'm fat. I don't value the change enough to stop eating. I need to go exercise more, and I'm not pushing myself enough to do that. So contractors are not going to change their business model if they don't see the value in doing so. So the way that I've come to look at it is the only way that we are going to move to decarbonization with the kitchen table is to create a business model that is so much better than business as usual. It takes over like an invasive species. So now that we've moved to West Virginia here, kudzu is a thing here. So everywhere where it's sunny mountainsides, just they take over the trees, they take over the fields, just gone. And I guess they call it a foot a night vine. It'll grow a foot a day. That's probably an exaggeration, but I mean, it moves fast. And so if we don't solve that value problem, that's a problem. And then for consumers, there's two value problems. So the first one is it worth the first cost? Are they willing to write the check for the system or whatever the upgrades are? The second one is when they sell the house, will they get any of it back? And in our experience, watching a few of our clients sell their houses, the answer is hell no, zero. They're going to get nothing. So economically, cars do this all the time, but we see value, like the cars depreciate like crazy. But could you imagine buying a car for $30,000 and the next day it's worth zero? That's not a good thing. We would sell a lot fewer cars. We need to have residual value of some sort. So particularly in cold climates where shell upgrades are needed in probably about half of homes to be able to decarbonize them, if it requires $40,000 or $50,000, because some of these houses are older and bigger and more complicated, more expensive to do, if you need $40,000 or $50,000 to upgrade that house to where you can put a heat pump in, so that it's decarbonized, but at resale you get Zippo. That you're going to find a few people that'll do it, but in our experience, the people that do the projects that we do, there's a few things that they have in mind, because we're talking about the exact kind of projects that we developed a process to do. So the advanced piece of HVAC 2.0 sells these projects. They're the really hard ones. So they're people that are going to live in their house for a long time. Typically they love where the house is, but they don't like the house. So the house is uncomfortable. They have problems that are large enough to solve that they're willing to pay tens of thousands of dollars to do it. And they have the money. So having those three things together, the money to do it, the problem to do it, and planning to live in a house for a long time, that's only a couple percent of the market. So realistically, as the market stands, I cannot see any way past about 3% of deep energy upgrades or comprehensive energy upgrades on houses in the US or Canada. I cannot see a path beyond that.
Right. So the policy that you talked about, the proposal that you co-wrote, and where you're at the upstream incentive, you're giving manufacturers, some incentives so that, every air conditioner installed by default is a heat pump install. Mm-hmm. And so that so when you come downstream to the kitchen table, then it's not friction because it's not a decision point. It's not. It is what it is. That's the
I want a stick shift minivan. Well, that's nice. They don't make one. Would you like the automatic one I have or the automatic one that I have? What color do you want? What model? But yeah, it's no longer even on the table as part of the solution set. So it's no. So
friction. There are minor technical learnings that come from having to learn how to do a heat pump with relation to air conditioning, but those technical issues will be solved once contractors can develop a successful business model out of installing heat pumps.
Well, now they don't even need a successful business model to just make hybrids. And, if they're doing a 14 SEER or 13 SEER air conditioner, they make it a 14 SEER heat pump.
Yeah.
They're just going to do it.
Okay. So with this proposal at this point, we are still working under the fragile and friction filled church of the kitchen table stuff, but at least it does no harm.
Correct. Yeah, it doesn't add friction to the
Yeah.
kitchen table.
Yeah. So if there's something you can do, if you can't add grease,
yeah.
and if you can't improve trust, at the very least, try to do no harm.
Yes.
Okay. So then maybe in the next episode, we can talk about what are the different ways in which, I mean, this will have to be, we'll have to, again, go into the boundaries and we have to spitball here with our mind, but the ways in which maybe HVAC 2.0 sales process, or maybe, some home, the Electrify Everything course that you built, the HVAC 101 chapters that you've written, stuff like that, how these elements help reduce the friction and reduce the fragility of the relationship between the homeowner and the contractor to a point where it's not a volume sale, or it's not a commodified sale, but it becomes a consultative practice. So a policy goal can be, like, what we can take away from this is, a policy goal is to turn the church to the kitchen table away from a transactional relationship into a consultative, collaborative relationship.
And equal, a fun relationship, really, at the end of the day. I mean, in any relationship, do you like feeling like the child?
Not particularly, no.
Me neither. I mean, sometimes it's fun to be the parent, talk down to someone, but then the other person doesn't like it because they're the child.
Right.
So talking to people as adults, equal is really important, but setting up that relationship takes some work, we jokingly call it creating your own matrix. So you have to set the rules up front, and you can create that. But I mean, back to your point about training, this is very little of the training needed is technical. Not to say that none is, but if you as a policy person are like, oh, we just need technical training, this will work. No, it won't. It will not under any circumstances work, because this is a sales and marketing problem. We need the contractors to be comfortable with heat pumps, and just kind of, they need some experience actually using them, but they need to be able to talk to their homeowners in an intelligent way about them, not scare them off. Because right now, if you go to 90% of HVAC contractors, particularly in cold climates, and you say, I want a heat pump and no furnace, they will tell you you are nuts. And they're frankly right, because if you don't do the math on this, you could have a really bad experience. And who's going to get the blame for that bad experience? The homeowner's going to be all there like, he went that way. And they're going to point that finger at anybody aside from themselves. And the contractor's like, I want nothing to do. I'm out.
Yeah. Homeowners like, you're the last person to touch the box. And, I trusted you, brought you into my house. And and the contractors.
What a shame. I'm going to leave you a horrible review. And so the contractors can see this train wreck coming. So if we don't give contractors a way to reduce the risk and then increase the odds of success with the homeowners, we're going to fail. And that is much more of a sales training thing than it is a technical training thing.
Got it. So next episode, we will talk about the broad policy goal, which is reducing creative ways in which we can build trust between the homeowner and the contractor, so that the relationship is not transactional or adversarial, but it's more consultative and collaborative. And it's where each plays their role, stays in their lane, and shares responsibility for outcomes. Sound good?
Sounds like a plan to me. See you next time, Abhi.
See you, Nate.